If you have said to yourself, I should write that, or if someone has said to you, you should write that, then I'm talking to you because you need to write. And that's why you're tuned in to Why Write. Hi, I'm Angela Grout. I'm the host of Why Write, and I appreciate that you've joined in for another episode of Why Write today, where we talk to writers about why they're writing and find out what they're writing and the process of their writing so that you can write your story too. Because inside of us, we all have a story, and trying to get that story out sometimes needs a little encouragement and guidance. And that's where this show, Why Write, comes into play. So today we're doing a Zoom recording here, and I'm very excited. As you can see on the screen, I have Brandi Dredge here. Hi, Brandi. And Brandi is a mom and an encourager, and she loves a strong cup of coffee, which I'm not sure if you have one right now, but if you do, feel free to sip. She is joining us live from Missouri today. She is an author dedicated to empowering survivors through storytelling. Her journey is a testimony to resiliency. And, you know, I just recently found out that her and I are both members of the National Association of Memoir Writers, and we both share a love of swimming and wading in the emotions of penning poetry on paper. So it's nice to meet a fellow writer who I share common bonds with besides just writing. Now, in addition to becoming an author, Brandi has become a voice to important causes that are close to her heart, including being part of the National Coalition to End Child Marriage. And she serves with the Junior League of America. Her first novel, as you can see on the screen here, is called Girl Uncoded. It's a memoir of passion, betrayal, and eventual blessings, which I love. Brandi Dredge, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to be here.
Congratulations on writing, completing, and publishing your book.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now, yeah, thank you. Yes, we talked earlier this week on the telephone, and we were able to talk a little bit about our writing journey and writing about trauma. And Girl Uncoded. I mean, you were 22 years old when you started this. I'm going to say roller coaster of a relationship.
And well, yeah, and actually I was a little earlier than that. I was 16 when it would have started, got married at 17. So
yeah, so right there is where I see your passion to stop child marriages, because 15, 16, 17, I don't care, 20, it's too young to be married.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And that is the reason, the passion behind it, for sure. Yeah.
How long were you married?
9 years by the time that he was incarcerated. When he had gotten incarcerated, we got divorced right before he was to go to prison. So, and like when I mean right before, it was like they had scheduled our divorce hearing the day before he would have been
the day before he
because they did that from a so that he wouldn't have to be like transported back, because he would go out of our community to another city that he would be incarcerated at. And so it was a way to save on that cost. Nowadays, of course, the technology is different, but back then, like, they would transport you and stuff. So
you've written this memoir of a relationship, a man, your husband at the time, who was not a very nice person, and everything that you went through. And writing memoir, I know, is extremely vulnerable. I mean, going back to write it, as you're writing it, are you reliving the traumas?
Yeah, and initially when I started, I mean, I didn't realize, I didn't like sit down one day and be like, oh, I want to write a story about my life. I just started journaling, because even after I had gotten divorced and he was gone and out of the picture, it was still very much like, it was like I was still holding on to this past that I would have told anybody, oh, I've let it go and I'm fine and all these things. So I started going to church and journaling. And that was in 2015 when I started doing that. And the more I started journaling, it just started to unlock like these secrets within myself. And then before I knew it, it's like, oh, I think there's something here to share with others. And then I really felt that God put that on my heart. And I even said to a women's group, yeah, I feel like God's calling me to write a book. I was a little scared to say it out loud at first because it sounds so
Yeah.
like, and then of course, imposter syndrome, so you got that in your head of like, who am I to think that that my story, because unfortunately, my story isn't uncommon. Unfortunately, abuse is highly common. I mean, it's unfortunate that it's like that. So a lot of people, particularly women, could write a lot of stories about
Yeah.
that topic. And so,
So
that went through my
one
mind
of
of
the
like,
things I found fascinating about your memoir is that, when people, think, oh, you write a memoir, it's going to be, and you're talking about everything being, your story. And you've created, well, you've changed names in the story. So Brandi is not in the story, and your husband's real name is not used. And a lot of people's real names and locations, things like that, you changed. And can you talk a little bit about like why you did some of those things and like what are the, do writers have to worry about the rights to change the name, especially when it's in a memoir, because you're trying to write, I mean, you are writing the truth, but now we're kind of covering things up a little.
yeah, absolutely. Changing other people's names, of course, is something that you always have to be, cautious about, especially if other people, haven't chosen to be written about, is always something that you have to think of. So, of course, I changed the other name to protect identities. Now, myself, I still chose to write under my name, Brandi Dredge. I mean, I chose to still write the book under my name, but I chose to change my name in the story to Caroline, for a couple reasons. As once I started journaling and then getting to the healing portion, I kind of realized that, I had to be the one to write it, but I don't have to be the one to take the reader through it. And so to honor my path of healing and to reflect like letting go and the power of transformation, I wanted to change it. And then I didn't want to like betray the genre of memoir or feel like, I'm doing something that you're just not supposed to do. And so I originally had asked a, a lady who had been in the industry for 20 some years, and she had advised me not to, because for those reasons, that memoir you should write under your name. But then once I got with my publisher, she said that she felt that there was a precedent for it, and that felt so freeing, because that was exactly how I had felt too. That I think there is a precedent for it. For,
100% I see it. I mean,
yeah,
as I was reading it, I'm seeing like, in a way, it's helped to remove you from the story because you're sharing Caroline's story. And even though
absolutely.
it's your story, the word transformation comes up. Like you are being transformed into, remaining Brandi, but being
Yes.
a brave and strong and confident Brandi who's sharing this time in her life known as Caroline.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes. Well said. Well
yeah. I
said.
mean,
That's exactly. Yes. And then even when I changed it, then being able to read the story myself, I was able to get into the story in a whole new way. As a reader, being able to really go along the journey with her
yeah,
and
because it can remove you from, I think, the situation. I mean,
yes, it
I always
definitely.
say, like, even in my stories, every book and every story I've written has me in there, but sometimes I go, well, all this stuff has happened in my life, but it didn't necessarily happen to me. So being able to use those experiences with that character, separates it. It still allows me to tell the authentic truth of an experience, but,
Absolutely.
not owning it saying, oh yeah, I was stabbed 19 times and left in the woods for dead. Like I
Sure.
wasn't.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I came to the decision to want to change it when I first had to ask about that. I by that point was at my fourth draft. And so now had I had tried to do that earlier on, it, it wouldn't have worked for many reasons, because I needed to do that healing. I needed to actually hear my name on the page, be writing my name on, getting that out. So it wouldn't have been the same kind of story had I not have did that. We wouldn't have dropped to that depth if I would
Yeah,
have
and
put that up front.
even changing your husband's name, which,
Absolutely.
I
Yep.
chuckle a little over. It's Gary Richard, and of course I'm thinking, Gary the Dick. But you change it to Gary Richard, so you're not, repeating the trauma of saying his name. It is this, persona of Gary Richard.
Absolutely, yeah. And by doing and his name, I gave him a first and a middle name. The last name in the story is Downey. So Gary Richard would be the first and the middle name. But the reason why I did the two names like that, where it's coming throughout the story, is to really creatively kind of show that the infatuation, the obsession, the almost feeling that he's more important than myself. I had met him when I was 16. So for all of, the time that we were together, he, in my mind, in the trauma, he was more important than myself.
Right. Yeah, you definitely saw him. He was on a throne, I mean, you respected him and
Absolutely.
admired
Yeah.
him
And
and
so
didn't
that was
think
a way
he was
to
wrong,
elevate him creatively.
which is something I think all young girls want in their Prince Charming.
Absolutely. Yeah. We all want the fairy tale. Yeah. We all want the fairy tale.
But
Yeah.
no, because it was interesting that you always referred to him as Gary Richard, Gary Richard,
Yes.
Gary Richard. And I was like, wow, she keeps, saying the full first two names. So, it really kind of, makes the story memorable. I don't want to say makes his character memorable,
For
but
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
it definitely does. I mean, the whole story from my perspective, I felt like it was such an accurate portrayal of like such a complicated story. And I'm going to talk like, it's a story and not your life, but
Sure.
you keep the reader right going along this journey with you, and being able to witness and see and experience the things that Caroline experiences. And every life, especially true life, is complicated. I mean, there's,
Sure.
we can't make this stuff up. Real life, you definitely can't. So, as
Yeah.
far as your book, I mean, for a first book, wow, well written, definitely,
Thank you.
and I loved the dialogue that you created, and definitely, how you would put your own thoughts in italics and stuff. And as a writer, I question, like, how did you recreate that dialogue? Because, again, I know it's memoir, and
Yep.
it's your memoir.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like with the putting in italics now, that was the advice of my copy editor. She said, Ginger Kobaba, she was amazing, did taught me so much. But she said that if you didn't put your thoughts that way, then it would be confusing to the reader for them to follow along. And then recreating the dialogue, when I'm having to drop down in those scenes and tapping into that emotion, then you're writing from that true place of what that emotion is in that scene. And some of that dialogue is, because it's coming from memory and it's true to my memory of that occurrence of it. But it was from dropping down in that emotion and then trying to tap into what that emotion was and what would have been true to that scene, depending on which
Yeah.
scene it was in the
No,
book.
I mean
But
it's very authentic, I mean I
yeah,
was like, oh, did she record that conversation? But like I know, your memory has to be, tapped into, and creatively we have to, come up with the
yeah,
dialogue.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so you're dropping a bunch of little Easter eggs here, I'll say, with like the copy editor and the
Yep.
publisher and the publicist and things. And like on that side of the writing, like, well, first you have a table of contents, which I
Yes.
like.
Yeah.
And it kind of, does tell the story in a chronological order. Did you write it in a chronological order, or did you come up with the topics and then say, okay, today I'm going to pick this one? Or how did you start writing that?
I wrote it chronologically. I did basically kind of from my birth, like even when I pull out some of those very first manuscripts, I did start from basically saying that in a way, early childhood. But yeah, so I wrote very chronologically and then just started there and wrote it all out. And then, the further drafts we got, I did a total of 7 drafts. So the further we got into it, some of those things get carved out, chapters get cut out,
Well,
things
yeah, I mean,
get
because when you're doing a memoir, I mean, sometimes we think it's so overwhelming because we think it's the memoir of the whole life and it's a snapshot of a certain time. So because of the way that this snapshot is, we don't necessarily need to know about, birth to age 12. We don't.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I understand that. And so how did you, I know the process, so I want to share it with the audience, but like, once you write this, sort of perfect first draft, now you're asking people to read it, you're getting a copy editor and editors, and what's that process like, and how did you find these people, and what did they offer for you?
For sure. After our conversation that day, I thought, oh, I completely forgot about the very first person that saw it. And I had went to a Christian music festival, and in the room, this was after I'd written the first draft, there was a lady in there who had written 3 books at that point, and they were just visiting with her. And I heard somebody say that. So I shot up and was like, oh, you've written books before? And so then I asked her if she would be willing to take a look at it. And she did. And she was so kind, but she also told me it read like 3 different books. which as you know is not a good thing if it's reading like, because it needs to read cohesively, and she's like, I can't tell if this is self-help or all of that. And so she was my first one that did. And then I worked on some drafts by myself, and then I ended up coming across Ginger Kolbaba, and she worked on she did a lot of things and has been in the industry for over 20 years, and then helped with the book The Impossible, which then became the movie Breakthrough. And she taught me so much, including like she's actually who saw where my story began, and is like, those first 2 chapters need to go for the same reasons you just said, because we don't need that.
Yeah.
We don't need that part of the story. You can lace pieces of that in throughout it, but we don't need those as 2 whole chapters. And so, but that was something I would have never known that.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to every editor and copy editor that's out there for doing that, because you're right. They can, when I was working with mine for April Rain, like she would be like, this chapter should come before this one, or, she'll see things that, you've already told me this here. Why are you repeating the story? And I'm like, well, I didn't know I told it. So then it's, making the decision where it stays, where it goes. It's totally worth, the value of getting a good book out to have someone go through it with, a fine-tooth comb, sort of. It's not just grammar and punctuation. And I mean, nowadays there's so many apps like Grammarly out there, and even, just your basic desktop editing that can take care of a lot of that stuff. But, it's the real human eye.
Yeah, like, because she would see a sentence and she'd be like, you're holding back on me here. You really need to expand this. I need you to really drop down into your emotions there. Like she could tell that. And that's definitely something I don't think that, we can get from AI or those other tools, is that human part where it's like, man, there had to be more to that than what you're telling me. And then she, would also say, you're writing a lot from hindsight. And that was one of the things that I realized I was doing that in that way to kind of stay safe, like, because if I do
writing in the past tense,
writing, like where I want you to think that I'm not still there. I'm not still in that situation. I don't still think like that. So I'm going to tell you it like I'm giving you a motivational speech, versus taking you along as I experience it and really showing you my naivety, my vulnerability, really showing that to you and really taking you along. I didn't realize that I was holding back in those ways, but now it's like, I see that would have been highly unfair to the reader had I did that, to not give you all of it and let you experience it with me, instead of trying to make you feel like I've surpassed it or like that I'm above it now, because the reality is I'm not, in ways.
You were in the trauma then. So, I mean, you need to tell the story that you were in the trauma. And it is true, especially when we're journalizing, we're saying, this is what I did today. And we're talking in the past sense, like, oh, I was so mad, but then when you're trying to then take that and edit it into a book, it has to be, I am mad. And then it has to go into, well, show that you were mad. Don't just tell us you were mad. Show us, oh, he said those words and I threw the pan across the room.
Yes.
Now you're like, oh, now you showed me you were mad.
Absolutely. Yes.
And
Yes.
and
Share
that's the
versus tell.
beauty of being able to write creatively and doing a memoir, doing a creative nonfiction,
Yeah.
is, it's a great way to be able to tell your story. Do you, I mean, I know the answer is going to be, it has to be yes, but do you feel that writing this story, when you were writing it or when it was done, like provided you with healing?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. It did when I was writing it, and then I would have again, if you would have asked me this before that, I would have said, okay, yeah, I'm good now. You know what I mean? But since publishing it, even now, it came out on October 22nd, and I'm still, a lot further down the path of healing. But I think that's the thing. Healing is a journey, and some days are better than others, and I'm a lot in a much stronger place now. But if I
Yep.
would, I can't say that I've fully surpassed it, but it is yes. So yes, the answer is
Yeah. Yeah, well, I
yes.
mean, the traumas and grief, ebb and flow throughout our life, even though we think we, might be over something or through something, you never know when that little, I want to say tiny tidal wave comes back and gets you.
Yeah,
But knowing that, you've survived your journey and, the title girl uncoded, it's like, you've uncoded the stuff he coded into you, or even your false beliefs that you had in what love was, or anything like that, is a story that not only you needed to write to heal you, but what I've learned is when we write a story, if we've healed ourselves, there's someone else who needs that healing. You're
yes.
you're here to set an example. I mean, sorry you had to go through what you went through, but thank you for going through it so that you can, be the light at the end of the tunnel for someone who doesn't know how to see it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. You said it beautifully. Yeah. Because that is the why, is to help somebody see what I couldn't. It's
Yep.
really hard to see it when you're in it. And so if I can help somebody see something sooner, we can't change the circumstances we're in if you can't see the circumstances you're in. And so it's like if I can empower somebody to be able to see it or to speak it, because as we said, I mean, everybody has a story and you never know who might need to hear it. It doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to write a book, but you could run into somebody or a friend that might need to hear something from you. And so it might hopefully empower somebody to be able to share their story with somebody else to be able to give them hope. And,
Yeah.
sometimes it's just hope to get through the day. Yeah,
Get up, take a shower, and just keep going. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Keep
so
going.
I want to bring this up because I love that you had a character in the story. I think it's your sister-in-law, I'm not sure, whose name is Brandy. No, Tabitha.
Oh, yes,
Tabitha,
Tabitha.
Tabitha. And
It's like a
and we
publicist
know, and
name.
the audience will know now, but you have a publicist named Tabitha. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden Tabitha made this appearance in the story, and I was like, oh, well, who's Tabitha now? Like I wanted to know a little bit more about her. And it was a nice way to kind of break up the the scaredness, that we had for you, and like being able to see you, have conversations with other people, and seeing your own, faith develop too, because you had this one great line, and you write that, you heard them say, like, okay, you can go, God's got you, and you heard God say, I got you, just go. And I think so many of us need to remember that, there is that voice that says, if you want to tell your story, just tell it. I got you. I got
Yeah.
you. Tell your story. Be free, set it free, and the right people will come along to help guide the story once you've told it, because you can't get those editors and proofreaders and publishers and publicists until the story's done.
So true. So true. Well, well said. Yes, absolutely. Because it is. It's all about, yeah, the blessing of the whole thing. I mean, the encoding, like when you spoke to the encoding, that identity piece, I mean, that is it that ultimately leads to that freedom that I found in God, that piece that doesn't make sense, that kind of that we've heard the line piece that surpasses all understanding, and it's true because some of the circumstances, it doesn't make sense why there was such peace, but now it does with God and God being within us. And so that that freedom piece for me was the uncoding. Yes, uncoding all of that identity that I kind of created to survive that really wasn't my true identity. And so that I could, I kind of had to uncode that girl so that I could step into the woman that I was created to be. And that's true for all of us. We're created for so much more. We're meant to thrive. And
100%.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you like working with a publicist? Can we spend maybe just like a minute talking about what a publicist is doing for you as a writer? What does a publicist do?
Absolutely. Well, what the publicist does is they help kind of build the book buzz and get me review opportunities. I just got my wrap up literally today with the campaign, and so they had got me 26 plus opportunities in news outlets and interviews and reviews. They did my Bookstagram tour, and I'm not even on Instagram, so that was nice that
Yeah.
was being able to get some buzz over in that social media environment, even though I'm not technically there. That was wonderful to see. That was something I wouldn't have been able to come up with on my own.
And they're maintaining that social media, kind of market and things, trying to.
Yeah, they like when they launch the campaign, like when the book, they usually start working with you about 6 months before your book comes out, and you develop the campaign, and then you really start hitting it 2 months before pub date, and then you then it starts really ramping up, and you have all these opportunities coming in, which are just places where they, can get some buzz around your title, because people with as many books as there are out there, if people
Yeah.
can't get your book if they don't know about your book,
Yeah,
and so
it takes a
even though
village, and marketing's a huge
yes, and
aspect.
even yes, and even though it's an investment for me, there again, that was another thing that I was willing to make that investment in, partially because of that. I work full time, and so some of that, I can't do it all. None of us can.
Yeah.
So I needed a team of people because there was just, and I'm blessed that I was able to be able to do that. But yeah, it helps having, people that can work in different lanes that they're experts in. And so it's just something that one less thing that I maybe have to
All right.
take.
Well, you're on the show today, so you're going to be your own publicist and tell us where we can find this book and where we can get more information about Brandi Dredge. And, who knows, maybe you're going to be coming out to Massachusetts to do a book signing and do a book talk. That'd be great.
I'm game for all the opportunities, so that would be wonderful. But Girl Uncoded is available everywhere the books are sold. So and you can get it online, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore. If they don't carry it, you can ask them to order it. They'll gladly do that for you. So you can find a Google search Girl Uncoded. It will come up. It will come up, and then my website, brandidredge.com. And then I also have a Facebook author page that's Brandi Dredge Author.
All right. Well, I'm going to put all the links down below for all the channels. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on this show, and thank you for, sharing your journey of, how to write a creative nonfiction memoir and survive reliving, a past that you don't want to be reliving, that you want to move on from, because it's an important story to be told, and it's an important way for writers to understand how they can share their stories and why they should, because it will help others.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for having. You've been a delight. I enjoyed our phone call. I've enjoyed this. So yeah,
Yeah,
such a
we'll
delight.
have to do this again, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I would love that.
Well, thank you, Brandi, and thank you to my audience who tunes in every week and follows us on YouTube. I want to thank Studio 954 for helping to make this show possible. And at this point of the program is when I tell my writing audience that it's time for them to pick up their pen. So when the show ends, send your phone timer or your microwave timer for 5 or 10 minutes and just start writing. And today we're going to give you a little writing prompt based on the fact that we are all creative people, and we all have some story that we know can share and help another person. So not that I'm trying to open a can of worms here, but we've all suffered some sort of trauma in our life. Who knows? Maybe you were in school one day and, a teacher yelled at you for chewing gum. Maybe it's that minor. Maybe, something else happened, or you were in an abusive relationship, or, you suffered a loss. Write about that. Just sit down and say, I want to tell the story of when this happened. Tell us what it was. and tell us why you think you should be telling us that story. Because in writing those things, you're going to find out that you're going to be completely healed from the trauma itself, but you're going to be able to help somebody else too. So pick up your pens, start writing, and tune in again for another episode of Why Write. And until then, I will see you next time. Have a great day.